Good morning, and thank you for joining us today in the FT studio to discuss what has been termed the greatest wealth transfer in history. Nearly £5.5 trillion due to pass from one generation to the next over the next 3 decades. I'm Claire Barrett, the FT's consumer editor, and I'm going to be with you for the next 30 minutes or so, talking you through all of the issues that you and your family need to be aware of if you're thinking of passing down cash, or perhaps hoping to be on the receiving end.
Take the name off.
We will be taking questions later in the session, so please use the box to the right of your screen if you want to submit one. And as ever, please be aware that these sessions are meant for information and guidance only. They're not intended as individual financial advice or tax planning advice. For that, you'll need to speak to a professional, but we've got lots of information and tips to share that can help you get the most out of that conversation. So let's meet our two experts. Matt Strachan is the Chief Investment Officer of Thornton's Investment, nothing to do with chocolate, and the investment management group is based in Dundee in Scotland. He has got a background in fund management, and his specialist subject is using AIM shares, that's the alternative investment market, to manage inheritance tax liability. Welcome to the studio, Matt.
Good morning, Claire. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, yes, it's a bit warmer in London
it's
today
a little bit warmer
than
than
it is in
back home.
Dundee,
Yes,
and the markets are also in meltdown. And then joining us over the line is Kerry Nelson, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Nexus Financial Group, a fast-growing advisory firm that offers financial planning and investment advice. And she is somebody who's well known for her campaigning voice in the finance industry. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm going to break the ice by asking you both about your typical clients. Now, starting with you, Matt, because you're in the studio with me, at what stage do people really start worrying about inheritance tax?
We often find it's when they're approaching retirement. I think they're sort of moving from that working stage of life to the next stage. And they begin to sort of just coalesce their ideas about, okay, what do we do for the next stage comes about. But very often I find in our client base that it's the change in status to being a grandparent that triggers the thought. So the typical one is, look, we've paid for our kids, we've fed them, we've watered them, we've taken them to school, we've probably paid for their university, taken them on holiday, probably even nowadays help with their house. And there's a case of, well, now they can look after themselves. But when a grandchild appears, that definitely seems to be a sort of mental
Take
shift.
the name strap off, please.
A chill through my heart because this is breaking news, folks. I'm all being well. I'm due to become a grandmother next month. My stepdaughter is pregnant, but funnily enough, I haven't started worrying about inheritance tax yet. But Kerry, what's your experience with your clients? Is it when they become grandparents, or are there any other common triggers for thinking IHT, OMG?
I think it's quite a gradual evolution, actually. And I agree with Matt. The trigger point that people start to put it on their immediate radar is when actually they come to retirement. And then thereafter, it's when there's significant events in their family, or actually when they see people around them suffering, or something actually happening that makes them much more aware of their own mortality at the end of the day, and also much more aware of none of us actually know when we all are to depart this earth, basically. So actually, it's a gradual process, and it's a really difficult one for many people, actually. And I know from experience, we've got a few clients that we're in discussions with at the moment, and we have been for quite a few years, actually. And it's not an easy subject for many.
I mean, what would you say, Kerry, are the typical questions that people have when they come to see you asking for advice about passing down wealth? What are the issues that are making it difficult, that they're stumbling over?
I think that actually the reality is not many people actively go out and ask for advice in inheritance tax. It's actually more of a holistic thing that I experience in terms of the clients that we work with, because we're working with them very closely. And as I said to you, it's quite an emotive subject, because actually, if you talk about the generation now who are already retired, it's a generation of people that are being encouraged to save, and save very hard and be frugal. And actually, what you're starting to do is have a conversation with them that's very different, and actually saying, well, now's the time to give that money away. And you're then asking to change well embedded habits. So it's quite difficult for those of a certain age now, it's quite a difficult thing to navigate and get your head around, actually. So we don't find so many people proactively coming to knock on our door. It's more of us actually saying, well, we really need to discuss this with you. We need to discuss this because would you rather actually hand the taxman a significant amount of your wealth, or would you like to start consider ways that you can help mitigate that and start to think a little bit more proactively?
Well, I suppose, Matt, working out what your client's IHT liability might be as a number could have perhaps a financially laxative effect when it comes to giving away money.
Absolutely, yes. And I think often it does come as a bit of a surprise to some clients in terms of what potentially could be sort of going to the taxman rather than going to their heirs.
And how would you say the conversations that you typically have with your clients pan out? What are the questions that they're tending to be asking you?
It varies hugely by client. Often the first one is, well, what can I afford to give away? And again, this is where you really do need to have a conversation with a financial advisor, because it's they're sometimes in a position to give a reasonable amount away, but are reluctant. I think, as Kerry said, they've been the stoics, the savers, and they feel awkward about sort of losing control or grip of things, and timing issues as well. I think with the sort of, if you just gift the fact that you've got a sort of 7-year clock ticking and it's potentially exempt until you get to a full 7 years, that sometimes sort of raises questions and uncertainties in their own mind.
Well, very interesting. And don't forget, if you're watching this remotely, if you've got a question that you want to put to the experts, then please put it in the box to your right. Don't hang around. I can see them all coming in on my iPad, and we'll put the best ones to Matt and to Kerry nearer the end of the session. So obviously the easiest way to reduce IHT bills is to give money away. But Matt and Kerry, this issue of working out how much to give and when, and also to whom, these are tricky things to work through. You might have one child or grandchild who you perhaps want to give a bit more money to because they don't have a wealthy partner or a job in the city that pays lots of money, for example, and that can obviously cause a lot of division within families. I mean, when it comes to the question of working out how much, starting with you, Matt, how would you go about tackling that with clients?
It is obviously part of the bigger sort of estate planning exercise. Obviously you need to come to some sort of reasonable estimate or guesstimate of how much they need to fulfill what they deem to be a comfortable lifestyle or what they want to do. I mean, very often it's still they feel active and we'd like to travel more, sort of thing. Well, now that we can travel again. So that
you can get out of the air.
Well, true. Yes, there's a couple of hurdles still in the way. But yeah, so it's, there's quite a long sort of series of things that need to be worked out. And if they're in the fortunate position where they can comfortably cover the sort of expenditures that they require, and they are looking to make sure that kind of what's left over, especially if it's going to cross over that inheritance tax threshold, which obviously has not changed since 2009 and is fixed until we get to the end of the 26th.
Oh yes, and with inflation roaring up.
Exactly, yes. It's, as you say, that sort of fiscal erosion is going on there. So, when you get to that position, it's then, how do we give it away? And of course, there's a number of different sort of methods of sort of passing on or trying to reduce the potential inheritance tax bill. So there's a raft of things in there.
And what would you add to that, Kerry? You've been listening to how Matt tackles this with his clients, but like working out how much you might give to whom and when is a pretty tricky thing to work through.
So I think there's various ways to look at this. Not only can you look to gift out of income, because some people get to a point, especially later in life, that when we all slow down a little bit, we don't spend quite so much money out of income. So then actually we get a little bit left over each month, and that's an easy way. Also, it's a great way to help family in the here and now and the present, and actually see the impact of that gifting and supporting a family if it's a little bit more difficult, especially in this environment when bills are going up, interest rates are going up, all of those factors. So actually, as a grandparent or someone who is gifting, it's a good way to see the benefit of that. So we would do this on a gradual approach. We'd look at what is available from income, if there is anything. We would look at what the annual gift allowances are. Then we would look at the makeup of those assets and the practicality of the accessibility of that. And then actually, of those assets, what do they never need to get hold of and use as capital expenditure? Because also, when we start to think about gifting something, if we're still a little reliant on those assets for some kind of income, we could still gift it and take benefit in that gift as an income. So actually, there's lots of ways to gradually introduce this process and do little bit by little bit. But what I would say from experience is everyone thinks that we have a long time, and everyone thinks that we can leave it another couple of years and another couple of years. And actually, I've had those conversations with clients, and those years go on, and you get to your mid-70s, and actually you start to think, well, you've got to survive 7 years for it to really have the impact you want it to have. So perhaps what you can do without feeling pressured that it's an all or nothing scenario, you can look at the smaller things that you can start to do earlier on. And within those annual allowances, you could actually start to think, well, do my children directly need this, or are they particularly doing well for themselves? Have they got great careers, and do they need our financial assistance? So what about starting to build a financial future for our grandchildren? And what about actually thinking of giving them a legacy and starting a pension for them, or starting to build ISAs for them? And they can use some of the gift allowance towards that. They can use some of the gifting in income for that. And we're having a lot of those conversations with some particular clients at this moment in time, that their capital that they have is significant. And so there's lots of different ways that actually they can enjoy their capital, but can be seen to be gifting and celebrating those things with their family. But also start to do the small things that actually start to remove lump sums outside of the estate. And it ties in to a certain area that Matt manages money in. And we work with Matt in particular on this, whereby you want to try and maximize as much as you can. You'll have a strategy that some of those assets are going to be subject to the 7-year rule. But we might be getting to the point that we've left some of this planning a little bit later in life, and actually there's significant assets. So we want to deploy lots of different options. Part of those options is to use, and without stealing his thunder, because he can explain far more about how they work, part of that is to be able to ring fence some of your investments within AIM portfolios, because actually what that does is remove it from the estate within 2 years. And what we do with clients, actually, especially those whom have significantly built up their ISA pots, having religiously invested in those in many years, we can have sub-accounts within. Yeah, well done. You're taking a dose of your own medicine. So actually, you can have a sub-account within your ISA with many institutions, that actually you can allocate some of those funds to an AIM portfolio. So you can start to introduce removing some of these funds outside of the estate without thinking I've got to give my entire ISA portfolio over to estate planning. So there's lots of good ways that you can introduce methods to start to move assets out.
Thank you for that, Kerry. Loads of really good tips in your answer there. All I would say to people who are watching at home or in the office, if we're going a bit too fast for you, if there are any things, any terms or things that we're using, this is what the question box is for. Don't be afraid to say, actually, could you give us a bit of an explainer on the 7-year rule or things like that? It's hard for me to tell through the screen the kind of things that you want to know. So do make use of that Q&A. Well, let's turn now to investing in AIM traded companies, Matt. So this is a thing that people may have heard of, they might not have heard of. Tell us why it works from an inheritance tax point of view and why this tax break exists, because many people have thought over the years at different budgets that a future chancellor might remove it.
Yeah, so I suppose the sort of tackling the sort of last point first, unfortunately it does get sort of kite flown regularly in front of budgets that the tax break could be removed, but I think the sort of the key thing is trying to understand that in many ways there's a sort of quid pro quo going on here. So it's trying to encourage capital into what is effectively sort of development UK PLC. So the AIM market is the junior market on the London Stock Exchange, and it was set up in '95. And has survived extremely well. And as a sort of conduit for getting capital into companies developing, it's been an enormous success. So there's well over 100 billion has been raised for these companies. And some of them have gone on to be extremely successful, moved up to the main market. So the legislation around the tax break was originally business property relief, now called business relief. And that was from '76. And essentially, not all AIM companies qualify. So there is a set of slightly grey rules that determine which company is a qualifying business.
So if they do things like investment, property,
exactly,
they're the big two categories, they won't count.
No. So you're not trying to, they didn't want a tax shelter around what is essentially just investments. It's like, well, I've got investments, I'll put a tax shelter on that. This is meant to be operating businesses,
growth companies,
exactly, that need the capital,
jobs in the UK.
Yes, that's right. So
boosting GDP.
Well, just next generation of business. And probably never more important than now. So the tax rules, if the business qualifies, and of course you don't know, because it's only when you submit an estate to HMRC that they then determine whether that business qualified. Now, you have to own it for a minimum of 2 years and hold it at date of death,
right,
in order to qualify. And if it qualifies and you've held it for long enough, it will fall out of your estate for inheritance tax purposes. So the two big benefits are that it only takes 2 years, so you don't have a 7-year clock ticking, and you retain full control. So one of the nice things that certainly we find from clients is they like the idea that they're beginning to move some of their estate assets outside of the inheritance tax sort of capture, but they still retain the control just in case whatever happens that requires, a sudden need for that capital that they hadn't expected.
But of course, AIM companies can be risky.
Exactly.
There have been some great examples of growth stories over the years, but there have also been some squidgy ends, like Patisserie Valerie, to mention one that was featured in many AIM portfolios. You can also go to specialists who will set you up what they call an IHT ISA. Kerry on screen has also said many mainstream providers of ISAs now allow you a sub-portfolio to kind of hive off AIM-related investments.
Yes,
how are people approaching this from like an investment strategy?
So this is where we obviously step in. So as a discretionary manager, we will obviously spend a lot of our time ensuring that the businesses qualify as far as we understand the rules, and then it's also about just getting a good spread within the portfolio to mitigate those risks. So yes, I mean,
I'm imagining a spread of cakes now.
Yeah, I did
in my head. I had an inadequate breakfast.
Part Patisserie Valerie, we never had that, thankfully. But yes, in terms of individual stock-specific risk, it is slightly greater on AIM, particularly if they're a smaller company still in development phase, trying to get their product or their service to market and to a sort of viable.
Which is why you
business.
get the tax break.
That's why you get tax breaks. So that's the quid pro quo, is if your capital is helping the formation of businesses, and hopefully you will enjoy in that wealth creation, we'll give you a tax break, but it's money at risk.
Okay, I'm going to go to the audience questions now, because we've had some really good ones. If you want to get one in, do it now, because we've got 6 minutes left. So what investments could be acquired if left to a next of kin that would be exempt from inheritance tax is one question. One related to that: are self-invested personal pensions transferable to a son or daughter upon one's death? At present, my will says 50-50. So my son and daughter, what are the tax implications for them? Now, panel, I've bunched those two questions together, because obviously one of the obvious answers for investments that will be outside of your estate, apart from AIM shares, are, Matt, pensions. Tell us, give us a little explainer on how IHT works with pensions.
I'll probably defer to Kerry, but basically, as I understand it, yes, if you have a self-invested pension, as long as you define the beneficiaries to sort of fall further beyond you, it could, naturally, it would normally go to your spouse, but you can sort of descend it down to future generations, but you need to specify who the beneficiaries are.
Kerry, what would you like to add to that on pensions and other assets that would be outside of your estate?
So I don't think I need to add much more to Matt's confirmation on that. He was exactly right that you can pass your assets on to your spouse or your children, and it only becomes taxable when they actually start to take the benefits themselves. So effectively, it's kind of one of those elements that you want to encourage actually clients to deplete every other asset they have, rather than their pension, because it's the one thing that you can pass on. So, if we're looking at clients trying to deploy their income for their own benefit, and if they have a pot of ISAs, we'd say, actually, let's deplete that before we deplete your pension, because it's more of an efficient manner to pass on assets. And I think Matt has covered off the type of investment that you can use, really, that moves assets outside of the estate from an investment perspective in as swift a manner as possible. But there's no quick win on this kind of thing, and AIM portfolios are the quickest solution in terms of investments that you can deploy.
Now, another question from a reader that's come in. I've got one about AIM and then another one for you, Kerry, about gifts out of excess income. How does one know if an AIM stock is a qualifying business for business relief? Well, this is a really tough question, because there isn't a register anywhere saying this one's definitely allowed, as you said earlier. What would you guide listeners towards?
Oh, goodness me. I mean, as I say, HMRC, there's a set of rules of what qualifies for business relief, but they are fairly grey. The biggest problem is that businesses evolve and constantly change. So we've had a number of occasions where companies we've covered have made a small announcement. Perhaps it's been a sort of slice of shares that they've sort of put onto a market elsewhere. As soon as it comes off what's deemed to be an unrecognised market, then the whole company no longer qualifies. So we've had to go back and say, well, what about this, and sort of check up and see whether it's a recognised market or not. So there's a raft of things. It's not easy. We spend a lot of our time just monitoring all the statements and speaking to management of companies that we do. Yeah, and I mean, there are one or two people, I think, who say, yes, we think it'll qualify, but normally the legal caveat at the bottom is there is no guarantee, because it could be a company does something the next day that means it's disqualified.
All the more reason to have a spread.
Exactly. Yes, because it's only the individual company. It doesn't ding a whole portfolio.
Okay. Well, it's a really good question. Thanks for answering it. Sorry that there isn't a more perfect answer. But the last question here I'll put to Kerry. Are lifetime cash gifts out of excess income allowed over £3,000 per person? So that person is obviously referring to the different annual gifting allowances that HMRC gives you. Kerry, tell us a little bit more about gifts from excess income, because this is a real boon for many people when they find out about them.
It is really, and I think it's something that's often ignored. So it's any excess cash after, so net surplus income that you can deploy and use to pass on to your family, whomever you wish to gift the money to.
And that could be income coming in from a salary. It could be income from a defined benefit pension. But so long as you're not denuding your own needs.
So once you can, so long as you can fairly demonstrate that it is net surplus income and that you are not manipulating things, so obviously to be able to do that, then it is largely an area that's ignored.
Well,
and worth very
we're going to have
much
to end it
flagging for
there.
many of your listeners.
We're going to have to end it there. There are lots of articles both on ft.com/money, which is the money section, the bit of the paper I work for, and of course on the Investors Chronicle website, explaining many more of these things. If you have enjoyed watching what you've seen today, then do talk about it on social media. Our hashtag is IC Future of Private Investing. I'm at Claire B if you want to follow me. And all that remains to be done is to thank our wonderful panel, Kerry and Matt. Thanks for joining me in the studio today, and I will see you later on the next session. Thanks for joining us.